Hey, it's episode 75 of Mark Talks about his record collection, and today is Good Friday, the 2nd of April 2021. Thank you, Jesus, for the day off. We're now over a year into lockdown and COVID 19, and I can't help but think about how very, very different this would have been if this had happened 21 years ago. Um, Today, I'm going to be talking about the fifth album by Suede, A New Morning. This is not going to be an easy episode for a number of reasons. Firstly, the album's not amazing. Secondly, my personal life around the time of the album being released was equally not amazing. And thirdly, I have to be honest about that, it's not a great album. Now, opinion is split on A New Morning between two factions. One side thinking it's okay, the other side thinking it's absolutely terrible. I think there are very few people, if anybody, that actually says it's their favourite Suede album. But it's certainly divisive, and I've listened to it today for the first time in a long time, and it's not getting any better. So where we were when Suede finished the Head Music period in January, I think January the 27th, 2000, with a show in Israel. And they kind of went back home and they started writing new songs, and things all went very, very quiet. Head Music hadn't been a commercial 100% success. It got to number one in the charts, but only just scraped in by the skin of the teeth, in so much into the number one spots. The singles weren't quite as successful as perhaps the band were hoping for, and the band were thinking about or considering an arena tour, bearing in mind that some of their contemporaries, Oasis, Blur, Pulp, were easily into arena status at this point. The Britpop bubble had very clearly burst the second that Be Here Now had gone out. Some bands had survived that, and some bands hadn't. And I think Head Music was probably the last vestiges of Britpop. And Britpop, by the way, I was deep into the bar of Britpop. It was quite sexist, quite laddish, quite loud, quite raucous. I was not a fan of huge chunks of it, and to be fair, neither were Suede. So when the year 2000 came, the end of a decade, the end of a century, the end of a millennia, a new start, a new morning for the band, and also I think at the same time a number of changes had happened inside Suede's world. Neil left the group because he was still battling illness, and I think maybe to some extent that was the beginning of the end. I think because people have always felt that the core lineup of a band, the lineup that they really, really love from a band, is the one that really matters. And when that lineup changes, that's when the fans' relationship to the band can start to change, I think. And also, Brett had stopped taking quite so many drugs, and he'd moved into the country to try and detoxify himself, and that kind of removed the urban edge and the compulsion, I think, from some of the songs. So in terms of time, what happened next was the first fruits of the post Head Music period was announced with this, which is a show that the band played at the Airwaves Festival in Iceland in October 2000, and they promised to be playing some new stuff with a pretty compelling kind of, as if they're going to style out perhaps the slight falter that they had around Head Music, and carry on confidently that the plan has always been to continue remaining brilliant and writing and releasing new songs. There was a radio broadcast of the show in Iceland which only played the old songs. There is a circulating recording of the full show, which has, I think, 9 new songs, including a song called Refugees, which a studio version of that has never been released. And I really, really wanted to go to that show, and I couldn't go to that show. And as you'll say, that they had a competition here where you say, I really, really, really want to see Suede because, and then you put your answer in. And my answer was, I have just been dumped and I'm really bloody miserable. And Suede are my favourite band, and I need something to cheer me up. didn't quite work. I wasn't successful. I didn't get to go to Iceland. I've still not been to Iceland. And where I was at that point in my life was really tough. So I'd gone from being part of a couple, which I thought was quite a good couple, but clearly somebody else didn't, living in a house or a flat that she'd chosen in Walsall, and with a future mapped out. And then that future literally evaporated in front of my eyes, literally overnight. And so on the first Friday of February in the year 2000, I found myself unexpectedly single, completely baffled by the reasons which I've been given, reasons which I don't think even now are, they don't make sense to me, but they happened and I respect those. It felt like someone was making excuses, and I think maybe they'd met somebody else, but I don't know for sure, and I'm not going to labour the point. So imagine you go from being in a situation where you think you've got a future mapped out with somebody, and that the direction of travel that you've got for the rest of your life, it suddenly disappears in front of your eyes. You're living in a flat on one income, which you can't really afford, and you have to try and find a new way of living. So my life was pretty turbulent at that point. I was not happy, and I was trying to make sense of what had happened to me and to try and make sense of the world around me, and it wasn't really making a huge amount of sense. And the best way to solve that problem was to change my physical location. So I moved down to London in December 2000. And a huge chunk of the reason why I moved down to London for the year 2000 was Suede, because London was where it was happening. And I needed to move into a new place and reset and recast myself, almost like a reboot of my life, where I got to be the same actor, but I got to change all the other people around me in the franchise. And it worked successfully, because the past few years of my life, I've never ever been happier. But I was very unhappy at the time. And A New Morning, the album, as it was, didn't reflect where I was when that album came out. There was a number of bands, actually, that when the album came out, I just didn't connect with their material, because it just wasn't who I was or where I was in my life at that time. A New Morning is one of those. I really, really wanted to love that album, but I couldn't. And so I found myself in London, starting life again. So come the end of the year 2000, the band released their third fan club release. This one being the Sessions CD, which I may have mentioned in a previous episode, which is a combination of radio tracks recorded at IDF Radio in Tel Aviv on the 25th of January. A number of live songs from the Perivale Studio Show on the Head Music Tour, and some songs for IDF Radio in Israel in 1997. And one of the things around this is just quickly turn that round so you can see the back. It's got Since You Went Away on it, which is a beautiful acoustic version. It's got Another No One on it as well. That's a staggeringly good version of the song. They did a cover version of Neil Young's Birds, but they wanted to put that out. But for some reason, I think Neil Young would have allowed them to do that had there been a payment. And the band said, well, actually, it's for our fan club. We're not making any money out of this. And I think Neil Young was a bit confused by that and went, why aren't you charging people for this? But so be it. The first fruits from the New Morning sessions were released in 2001. It's this here. It's a track called Simon. This is, again, the fan club CD for Simon. And there's probably a Simon watching this. Hello, Simon. And there's this has got three songs on it, so it's got like two versions of Simon and an instrumental version that's taken from the soundtrack to a film called, I think, Far From China. And this was kind of like released to keep the band's visibility with the fan base ticking over, because it was 3.5 years after the release of Head Music that the next album, A New Morning, came, and a lot happened in those 3.5 years. The Britpop bubble exploded and was over. Suede had a movement which they'd been part of, which they'd ridden the crest of that wave, and that wave had disappeared. So they had to set themselves out as a new, vital band, but they didn't really quite know how to stick the landing there. So the recording sessions for A New Morning were pretty torturous, and they went on for a long period of time. As mentioned in David's book here, the band started off with a number of songs. So they wrote like a batch of 4 or 5 songs quite early, really, starting off with I think it's what is it, Oxygen. No, actually no, completely wrong here. So they started off with songs like Cheap, and I think Beautiful Loser, I think, was an early one that they recorded. One Hit to the Body, Lonely Girls, You Belong to Me, a song called Shout, and one called Positivity. But the sessions just weren't quite gelling, really. I think the band felt that it wasn't quite as good as it could have been. Now, I've heard some of those 2000 sessions. They're not widely circulating out in the big bad world, by the way. But they're pretty good, actually. They're certainly got the building blocks of a good album. And they'd also got, I think, as I mentioned, Oceans, Cheap, Lonely Girls, You Belong to Me, Beautiful Loser. And I mean, some of those lyrics were really good. Some of those lyrics, not so good. They're kind of like very direct. And I think this is one of the first things where people kind of feel that A New Morning isn't perhaps as good as some of the other Suede albums, is because the lyrics aren't particularly good. And this is where I mentioned earlier that I think Brett had maybe lost his sense of urban compulsion. He'd moved out from London, and so therefore the songs that he was writing were around the world that he was in. So he wasn't taking drugs, he wasn't living in London, he wasn't experiencing that urban reality. And if you think about earlier Suede albums before A New Morning, they're all around, you know, life in a city, life as a young person, with relationships and conflicts and lyrical illusions and everything like that. And the lyrics on A New Morning are far more simplistic, perhaps even banal in certain instances. And when I listened to the album this morning, I kind of thought, I don't even know what some of these songs are about. I'm trying to latch on to the wordplay that there are, and some of the wordplay in it just lacks any of the finesse or the style or the grace of, I think, some of the other ones. They're very kind of straightforward lyrics, and I think part of that might be down to the fact that he wanted to kind of simplify and reduce and consolidate, his writing powers. But lyrically, it just didn't sound quite like Suede anymore. So, for example, songs about diesel, gasoline, psychos, drum machines, nuclear pigs, all that stuff, those songs weren't there anymore. And so, aside from being able to hear that, yes, that's Brett, and yes, that's Richard, and that's Alex and Neil and Matt and Simon, it didn't really sound like a Suede album. It sounded like the members of Suede had reformed a new band, also called Suede, that played songs like Suede but slightly wonky, if that makes sense, or perhaps songs that weren't quite so good. And the songs were just not good enough, really. The band recorded many different versions and iterations of the songs. Now, I think they recorded the whole album 3 or 4 times. There was a download version of the album that you could get when you bought A New Morning. You put it into your CD player, it gave you a download link to an MP3 version of alternate takes of the album. And then also there was another mostly alternate version of the album was released as the bonus tracks on here. So there were I think 8 demos that are on the 2011 3-disc version of A New Morning. So between them, you're able to get multiple interpretations of what the album would sound like. And really and honestly, I think the band made the album and released it because they had to release it, because they'd spent all the money. It wasn't quite perhaps India's Chinese democracy, but without the compelling financial reason to release it, it may very well have become one. And so in late 2002, A New Morning came out. Here's a promo CDR of the album. And in the interim period, 2001, so Suede had largely disappeared off the face of the earth. Pulp were imploding in front of our very eyes. Oasis had shed most of their members and carried on as if it hadn't really mattered at all, and there were replacement parts of a lawnmower. And Suede played one show, I think, in 2001, one official show, where they headlined at short notice a festival, I think, in Portugal, because somebody else dropped out. And then they released this, Lost in TV, a DVD of their promotional videos. And it felt a little like the band were buying time. Also, it kind of ruined the greatest hits approach, because they couldn't put out a DVD to go with the greatest hits album, which inevitably was going to happen at some point. But going 2 years without Suede releasing anything, especially when the band had only been going for in the public eye, maybe 8-9 years. That would have been quite a long period of time. Now, some bands like U2 can go 5 years between albums. Some bands like Kraftwerk can go 17 years between albums. But they're all bands that have been going 20, 30, 40 years. To take a big gap like that between your first album or between your fourth album in your 8th year and your 5th album, which came out in the 11th year, you kind of have to have a confidence around that. Not every band can do it. Not every band can pull it off. And sometimes when you go back out there into the world, the things that you were doing and the things that you're doing are just different. The world has moved on. It's gone to a different place. And so Lost in TV felt a little bit like it was a museum piece from a band that didn't necessarily really exist. So A New Morning is a compilation of a multiple recordings of the album. I think there were versions recorded with Tony Hoffer, versions recorded with John Leckie, such as Beautiful Loser and Positivity. There was a track called Street Life, which the band recorded, which is perhaps pretty terrible, all things considered. Probably their worst album track, actually, apart from maybe Moving or Animal Lover. And I know some of you will probably say that Animal Lover and Moving are very good, but not even Brett agrees with you on that. And then they had Obsessions, but Obsessions as a song was largely written directly to Walter, almost in much the same fashion as Together, is that somebody sat down and went to Richard, we need a hit, write us a hit. And that kind of what happened. Now, Tony Hoffer says, I think the lackluster Stephen Street produced version of the album speaks for itself. To me, it sounds like a band going through the motions, a band cast adrift with self-doubt and muddled gold. It does not represent Suede at its best, and perhaps all the band wanted to do was re-record its demos in a bigger studio. And Brett says, I'm not sure I was at my sharpest mentally when I was writing the album. I think it's weak. I don't really quite know where I wanted to go. Matt says we should have just done it like we ended up doing and not bother with the experimentation and got it out quickly. We shouldn't have tried to tart it up. It ended up like 12-year-olds in makeup and high heels. We should have done it smaller and quickly and kept true to the sentiments, and we shouldn't have gone to the countryside because then you just go mental. And that's pretty much it is. So the album was finally completed on March 23rd, 2002, and there might have been an enormous sense of relief around that. So you had the Tony Hoffer sessions, you had the Stephen Street sessions, which are the final versions, I think, of most of the album. You had the John Leckie recordings. I think they spent a lot of time at a place called Parkgate as well. And it was just too long, too many versions, too many mixes, sucking the life out of the songs. And the songs, to be honest, weren't that great. So the first single from the album is Positivity. Here's a signed 3-disc slipcase version. It's also, by the way, the first single. One of the first singles. It wasn't released on vinyl, so you've got three disc versions here. So you've got a CD 1, CD 2, and a DVD single. DVD singles, that's probably the best artwork of the lot, actually. But it's still pretty weird, actually, to think about the DVD single, which is that they had 6 B-sides across this. So they had One Love, which is a great track, Simon, which is a great track, Superstar, which is okay, Cheap, which is pretty good. Then you've got Colours and Campfire Song, and neither Colours nor Campfire Song are the best Suede songs at all. Sorry guys, they're not. But what you've also got, and I should point this out, is that if you look through all the imagery that there is for this period, it's all photographs of CDs. I think the original designs that the band wanted to have were very different, but it lacked the visual flair and the sense of identity that other Suede records had. Now, if you looked at other Suede records, they looked like Suede records. There was something about them that inherently said, this is Suede. This could be Kanye's Yeezus, for example. It could be any one of 1,000 albums. A blank CD with a red tail on it doesn't convey anything that's essentially Suedeness about it. They really fucked up. Sorry guys, they really screwed up the visual representation of the band. So at the time that the band needed to come out with a strong visual representation, a statement that said, we are Suede and we are back and we are still brilliant, you got this, which doesn't mean anything and it doesn't connect in any way to the themes of the song Positivity. It's just a picture of a CD in a case, and it seemed cheap, and that's not an intentional pun. And then that was followed up with the album A New Morning, which again didn't do particularly well. Now here, when we talk about this, is that the single for Positivity made it to number 16 in the charts, and that was according to the book. That, however, was a staggering victory compared to the cataclysmic disaster that awaited. Reviews tended to be sympathetic, if hardly ecstatic. So, Enemy gave it a 7 out of 10, and Q magazine said Suede have settled for cult status. Their fifth album's a holding pattern, a circling of wagons that perhaps wisely was unveiled at a couple of mostly fan-only London shows. Of course, I went to those. So released on September the 30th, 2002, A New Morning limped to the charts at number 24. They'd had 3 number 1 albums and the number 3 album, and then all of a sudden A New Morning comes in at 24. And it was a really, really difficult time to both be a Suede fan, to like Suede, and to be watching Suede do this. And that sounds a little bit arrogant, but I knew that the band were aiming for something and they didn't hit it. It as an album, it just did not hit the target that it was going for at all, neither commercially nor creatively. And Matt says, it was difficult. We knew the kind of record we made, and we knew it was out of step with the times, and we weren't expecting it to go that badly. I think part of it came down to choosing a single that was almost deliberately chosen to alienate everyone who'd ever been into the band. And at the time that the band were doing this, when the week that it came out, they were playing like Welsh TV shows as opposed to national TV shows. They weren't getting radio play. People weren't hearing that there was a new Suede single out there, and if they were, it was sometimes the butt of a joke, which is a shame. Positivity is quite a good song. It's not an amazing song. I think it got made number 1 in one country, which is when the band play there. I think it's Taiwan, I think, or China. I could be wrong. They do play it, but everywhere else it fell on its arse, I'm afraid to say, because it certainly is probably my least favourite of the Suede singles released in the band's original incarnation, or in fact at any period of the band's life. It's probably my least favourite single, actually. So let's talk through A New Morning. All this time, I'm almost halfway through and I haven't even got to talking about the album. This is the red vinyl. I think it's red vinyl edition that was released in 2018 through Amazon. And the album was originally not released on vinyl, by the way. It was released on CD, probably cassette, but it wasn't released anywhere else. So this is a new Morning on vinyl, red vinyl, lovely, but never released on vinyl in the band's first incarnation. And it's a difficult album to like. The sequencing is way off. The songs are in the wrong place, and certainly the band haven't chosen all the best songs that they've got. So, for example, Beautiful Loser, which I think is both one of the best tracks on the album and also the song that should open side 1, probably is track 5. Positivity is number 1 on the record. Street Life is probably the most basic, simplistic and stupid song the band have released in a long time. It shouldn't have been on the album. It's good B-side material. And then you've got Astro Girl, which is okay. Morning, which is okay. One Hit to the Body. Brett has some very strong words about One Hit to the Body. So there's maybe half the album is good to great, and this is I'm a huge Suede fan, and it's heartbreaking to say that an album of theirs is at best good to great. Beautiful Loser is great. Lost in TV is great. Obsessions is great. Oceans is great. Most of the rest of it is all right. Lonely Girls is pretty good. Street Life is very bad indeed. And the album just is not very good at all. Of course, I'm not the only person that thinks that. In this fabulous book, which I'd recommend you buy, Afternoons with the Blinds Drawn by Brett Anderson, Brett says, mawkish, deliberately saccharine songs like Positivity are attempts to confound the fan base and somehow realign and reinvent ourselves. Um, I'm always sorry that yet again we ignored the real gems from that period, Simon, Cheap, and Oceans, and instead bewilderingly decided to include insipid trudge-throughs like One Hit to the Body, the sort of song that wouldn't have even been considered as a B-side in our early days. Our acuity was muddied and our perspective was utterly clouded. And I'm still proud of it. There's a couple of moments on the album which he's still proud of. The barreling, driving guitar rock of Obsessions, Matt's reflective Lost in TV, and Oceans. But, he calls Street Life, I think quite charitably, a below par rocker. Also talking about the cover to the album, in case you've forgotten how bad it is, it's a huge photograph of a CD stuck onto a CD or stuck onto a vinyl record. The sleeve to A New Morning was soulless and blank and corporate, bereft of any real personality or human content, perhaps a strangely appropriate reflection of the majority of the songs it clothed. By the time it came to releasing it, I simply had no idea what I thought of the album, and we took that step of blind faith that you often need to bravely make when releasing records and allowing it to be ushered out into the world, much like a child wandering into the traffic. So the cover for A New Morning is really bad. I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention this again. The band's original idea for the cover, by the way, was something far more simple. It was effectively a perspex kind of transparent sleeve with text written on it, and so you could see the CD in the box. I mean, effectively, you could have done that actually. Pet Shop Boys did something very, very similar with the frosted sleeve that they had on the Bilingual album. And I've seen other similar designs by other bands since, but to have a clear and transparent cover which effectively just had text on one side that was through there, you could put in a single white sheet, and then you could put a back sheet in that would effectively just have the information and the text printed on it, and then if you needed to put more information on there you could probably put it somewhere, but you'd have to have a very minimal, very, very kind of very minimalist approach to the cover. And I think actually if the cover to the album had just been, an empty box of this with, Suede, A New Morning written on it, and on the back there, on the back sleeve, again, it would have been the CD, and then you'd have just used this space here to describe album and so on and so forth. No pictures, just text. I think that would have been a bold statement, and it would have had more personality around it. But as it stands, to release a CD with a picture of the CD on the front was a terrible move, and they agree with me. This, by the way, is a copy of the 2 CD edition of the album that features bonus tracks recorded at the Roskilde Festival. This was released, I think, in Denmark, and I got this version signed, I think, at one of the installs for the singles album. So the week that the album came out, by the way, the midweek projections were pretty brutal for the band, and I'm going to kind of explain my relationship to it. So at this point, Positivity as a single, number 16. This is a vinyl edition from the 2014 singles box set, but this is the only time that Positivity has been released as a single on vinyl. So the band played a Virgin Megastore in-store appearance to about 600 people. This was the week that the projections had come out. So because I was going to see Suede in stores, I was buying quite a few copies of the album. I had quite a few copies to give away. I probably gave at least one of you out there watching a copy of this. And they played the Virgin Megastore, which is on YouTube. And Brett is in a terrible mood. He is so pissed off. I haven't seen anyone so annoyed on stage, probably ever, actually, because effectively that's the day that the midweeks came out. The realization is dropping that the band have taken a big hit here in terms of commercial position, and so therefore the money that they've invested over the past 2.5 years to make the album, which is not cheap by any standards, probably over £1 million if you take into account all the studio costs and salary costs, it's probably not going to make that back. In fact, I did some calculations, and I think the album sold something like 22,000 copies in the UK. So for every copy of A New Morning, if it was charged at cost, that the album cost to make, you should pay £50 for your CD of A New Morning, and I don't think anybody is going to pay that. But the midweek when it came out, Brett was so annoyed. You could see he was fuming. I've been in meetings where I've seen people that angry. I haven't enjoyed those meetings, but then to have to stand up in front of 700 or 600 people in the basement of the Virgin Megastore, which is now a clothes shop, and to have to sing songs from an album that you know is going to be pretty much the death knell of your career. Brett introduced one of the songs, and he went, "Here's a song from the new album. If you don't like it, tough shit." Yeah, something like that, which is not how you want to be selling an album. But then the whole thing about A New Morning is it just landed at the wrong time. The world had changed dramatically in the time since it had been, written and recorded. And that album, that sleeve, the choice of the songs, the choice of the singles, it's the worst Suede album. It is. I'm not going to pretend for a second that it isn't. It doesn't have the drama. It doesn't have the intellectual vigor. It doesn't have the articulate lyrics. Even the songs writing themselves, it feels both rushed and overthought at the same time, which is a bizarre and unusual kind of position for any band to be in, is to have rushed and underthought and overthought the same thing. All the life has been choked out of the versions of the songs on the album. And with the best will in the world, even with all the circulating demos and all the B-sides, I'm not sure you can make a good version of A New Morning, actually. I really don't think you can. Because if I can, sometime in the past 19 years, I would have found a version that worked. The best thing I've been able to do is to resequence it, and I'll put the resequence track listing down there. This is Suede's worst album. It's such a shame. As I said, half of it is pretty good to great, and the other half not great at all. I genuinely go years at a time without thinking about some of the songs on this album. Sometimes I even forget Street Life exists until I hear it, and then I'm like, oh, that's a song. And it's a shame, and I think it went wrong all the way from the choice of the first single, the sleeve art, everything just failed to land correctly. And I think part of that was down to, a crisis of confidence. The band didn't believe it. And if you listen to a band that you like, you should be able to go, this record exists because the band have a compulsion to make that song. They have a compulsion to write that song. Parts of it felt like, well, it's a Thursday, so we better write a song. And then that makes it really, really difficult to love a song if there's a sense of almost contractual obligation and the sense that the album came out because the band were in the hole financially. Now, the second single from the album is Obsessions. Here again is one of the 3-disc CD DVD sets that you got if you remember the mailing list. And Obsessions is a good song. It's an important song for me. There's 3 formats there, but again, photographs of CDs, not exactly inspiring at all. And the B-sides on this are Cool Thing and Instant Sunshine, UFO and Rainy Day Girl, and then Hard Candy and ABC Song. Even the song titles, ABC Song, Rainy Day Girl, UFO, they don't sound amazing. They sound like B-sides. And lyrically, I think there was just a lack of focus around it. I think the song should have been given another stab, or another write, or another draft. I think lyrically, it's by no means the best stuff the band ever did at all. But Obsessions is a great track, and there's I think an extra feature on the DVD called Developing Obsessions, and if I remember correctly, it is Developing Obsessions is an alternate version of the song that was recorded at the video shoot at the London ICA, which is now, by the way, the Islington Academy, in around about October 2002. I went to that. They played Obsessions about 3 or 4 times, and they played a full set of B-sides and requests. Great gig, absolutely loved it. And the other thing actually about the gig is that the footage that there was in the film, the video, they asked people who were in the fan club to put together statements, and then write them in there. Now, at one point in the video, there's a statement that looks very much like this, looking like Audrey Hepburn, but I didn't write that one. What I wrote is there were some questions around what are your obsessions, and I mentioned in the questionnaire that one of my obsessions was somebody that I loved and I couldn't be with for a multitude of reasons. And what I said was because she is perfect and everything about me was wrong. And they chose those words to put on the screen during a shot in the video, which I was both very, very surprised and very, very pleased with, because in my opinion at that time she was perfect and everything about me was wrong. Also looks really good on a screen. So I'll put the post up to the video of Obsession. And so the band went out on tour. Obsessions, here's a 7-inch that comes from the 2014 reissue box set. Is at some point in the charts, and the band are trying to style out their current position, and their current position is they're not going to be famous anymore. They played a lot of shows, and this is a bootleg CD recorded at the Berlin Universal Hall on the 18th of December 2000 CD, probably the last commercially released Suede bootleg CD, by the way, and recorded off the radio. And then things kind of went a little bit quiet. The band still toured. They turned up again in April 2003. They'd written and recorded some other songs. So songs that they'd recorded included Attitude, Golden Gun, Love the Way You Love, a song called Music Like Sex, which at that point was called Quiet Loud, a song called I Don't Need a High, and a song called Teenage Rose. And they played about 6 of these new songs at a gig in Greece in, I think, about April the 6th, 2003. I haven't heard a recording of that show. It's the only time they played Teenage Rose. It's the only time that they played, I think, some of the other songs as well. And I've never heard Teenage Rose. Although what I do know is I do know the guitar pedal tunings for that, because there's a photograph of Richard's kit that has Teenage Rose on it, and it shows you how everything is all set up. Don't know where that is, by the way. Now, there's also a song called I Don't Need a High that was recorded during those sessions, and that song hasn't been commercially released. About 90 seconds of it was accidentally published by the studio the band were recording at on the studio's website as an example of their studio recording abilities. I Don't Need a High is not a great song. It's quite forgettable, to be honest. Again, I've only heard 90 seconds of it, and I never felt the need to listen to it again, actually, even though it was one of the lost Suede songs. Come to the middle of 2003, the band are in festival mode. They were given a choice of 2 slots at Glastonbury. One was, I think, second from top on the other stage. The other one was third from top, playing at about 6 o'clock in the evening on the main stage. There was an argument between the band members. Ultimately, one of them won, and they played third from the top of the bill, whereas previously they'd headlined, because it would get them on television and get the whole of their set on the BBC. It started to feel a little bit desperate. The band was slipping down the bills. They were coming thirds. They were like thirds on, as opposed to headlining. Whereas previously, 1999, they'd headlined the V2000 festivals. They'd headlined Roskilde 3 nights in a row. They'd headlined Reading. They'd headlined Phoenix. They'd headlined Glastonbury before. Now they were playing in daylight, and it felt like it was the beginning of the end. And I'm the eternal optimist. I thought this is a blip, but it wasn't. This was the beginning of the end for the band. They announced 5 shows at the London ICA in September 2003, and those 5 shows were built around and designed to help plug the release of the Singles album, which was released in late 2003. This, by the way, is, I think, the Asian edition that comes with a DVD of a live show recorded at Singapore on August 15th, 2002. I saw the band play a number of shows around here. I saw 4 of the 5 ICA shows. I saw a couple of in-stores, including the Virgin Megastore show and the HMV show. And also I saw about 3 or 4 shows on the Singles headlining tour that the band did. But putting out a Singles album right on the back of another album, it started to feel that the band were in a process of retrenchment and consolidation, and maybe going, well, we're releasing greatest hits because we need to make money, and we need to remind people how good we are. And so Singles was backed up with a single called Attitude, The video features John Hurt and was shot at a disused theatre, which is in South London, which I've been to. And there are 3 editions of Attitude that came out. So let's have a quick look and see what's on these 3 editions. I've not opened this box for quite some time indeed. So there's CD 1, which is backed with Golden Gun. CD 2, which is backed with Just a Girl and Heroin. And then the DVD, and the DVD is backed with the original band version of We're So Disco and Arthur Baker remix of Head Music. And the Arthur Baker remix of Head Music is pretty good. It's certainly better than the version that's on the album. But it's never been reissued, so the only place you can get it is on here. And the band made the appearance at the ICA. They played 5 shows, and they played each one of their albums in full, mostly in order. And then they played an encore of what they called hits and treats, and that would be B-sides from the album, which means we got unique and the only performance of songs like Bored, for example, Cheap, Golden Gun was played at every show. Absolute belter live, by the way, Golden Gun. And Brett just kind of describes it as a sense of closure, that he kind of knew that this was going to be the beginning of the end for the band. He said, during our performance of Saturday night at the Coming Up show, I felt an overwhelming flood of emotion as the song took me back to all those wonderful early, guileless years together, and I began to cry during the second verse. And after all the drama of our turbulent and thrilling voyage, we had arrived at the predictable endpoint to which all bands will eventually arrive. And there's something frustrating about the inevitability. You think you're immune to it, and you find yourself tripping and tumbling into the same traps that you assume that you would have the nous to avoid, and it takes on a second layer of distress, and it felt like something or someone was mocking you, as if your failure is part of a hackneyed script, and your story is just like all the others, one of youthful endeavour, followed by a brief flicker of success and the sour but familiar taste of defeat. And the band played the Graham Norton show a few days later, and after they came off stage, walking down the corridor, and they sat down, and Brett said, I can't do this anymore. And that was the end for Suede. And they played some more shows. They fulfilled their contractual commitments. They played the last show at the London Astoria on, I think, the 13th of December 2003, and they played the Brixton Academy, I think, the night before. Of course, I was there, and I was crying, but it felt to me like part of my identity was ending, because being a Suede fan had been with me for well over 10 years. You know, the people I'd had significant and meaningful relationships with had all been Suede fans to that point in my life, and Suede brought me together with someone who's incredibly important to me to this day. And you know, without Suede, children would not be born, people would not have been married, lives would not have been changed. So when the band came to an end, you know, I spoke to my friend on the phone, and I could hear her heart break when I told her that. And at the same point, I knew mine was, and I was not happy. But everything must come to an end, and it was the end, the final showdown. So the band played those shows, and they opened the last show at the Astoria with The Next Life. And if you had any water left in your body, you will have cried to death by the end of that song, because we'll see you in the next life, where we'll fly away for good. And suddenly that promise that there was going to be a next life was broken. With the best will in the world, it was. It was a really tough time, actually. I was really unhappy. I was going through a relationship change. I see photographs of me from that show, and I know I'm ill, and I know that I'm drunk, and I know that I'm not well, and I'm hiding, and I'm trying to compensate with alcohol. But also, I knew that I was doing the best I could, and that's all anyone else can do, is the best that they can in the circumstances. That wasn't the end for the band. There was a couple of extra bits of administration which needed to happen. There was a fan club CD, See You in the Next Life, which came out shortly after, has a number of B-sides, has some demos, has some Stanbridge and Parkgate demos of songs from A New Morning. And then in 2011, a 3-disc deluxe version was released. There is no Fancy Pants 20th anniversary box set yet because we haven't been to a 20th anniversary. But this features all the B-sides, as I've said, probably 9, maybe 12 demos, videos, a DVD with a couple of live shows in, and a really interesting interview. If you can get this, please do, but it is not cheap. That brings us to the end of Suede's first life from 1990 to 2003. Hopefully it's been okay, and you found it been at least not boring. But in the meantime, don't be a dick in the comments. I will catch up with you in a future episode. I hope you are all well, and I miss seeing you and your lovely faces in real life. Okay, I'm going to go. Thank you. Take care of yourselves, all right? See you later. Bye.